Thank you, Simon. Right, well, welcome. I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International, and I'm here with Simon Faringo and also Garrick Prayog. We're directors of Learning Links International, and we thank Simon very much for organising all the techie things behind the scenes. And it's good to see you again, Garrick. You've been otherwise occupied for a little while as your mum's been over in the UK with you. Right, now I'm actually in Australia, in Melbourne, and one of my colleagues, friends here, is now over in the UK, and that's Levi Lawrence. But first of all, I'm going to do what we do here in Australia, and that is that before the beginning of any meeting or session, it's considered to be appropriate to um, welcome everybody by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm living at present. That's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And we've just had National Reconciliation Week, which was the 27th of May, sorry, to the 3rd of June. So there's a lot on the TV and all kinds of other things going on to try to start, well, not start, but get on with the healing. We've had various challenges, obviously, well, may not realise, since there was a referendum last year which didn't go particularly positively in terms of rights for Aboriginal people and respect. Now, just to say that with Black History Conversations, we acknowledge the injustice of the actions taken by the British and other European countries that invaded and took possession of the islands in the Caribbean Sea, as well as the continents of North and South America. In addition, we also recognise the exploitation of the great continents of Africa, Australia and Asia, and many other parts of the world in the centuries of colonisation and ongoing exploitation. We acknowledge this has resulted in the destruction and destabilisation of so many nations, peoples and cultures. And this, we're still within the International Decade for People of African Descent. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and we've got good colleagues with us. It's really lovely. But first of all, we're going to have a chat with you, Levi, and your sister Olette. Levi's flown over from Australia, and you're in the UK now. So, Levi, tell us a little bit about your story and how it relates to the Windrush, because it's kind of really does. Levi, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Sorry, I just.
Yeah,
okay.
How the Windrush relates to your story.
Okay,
yeah.
So
come on then, introduce yourself, Levi, and you and your sister Olette. I want you to tell us about something about your dad's story, which is really very special, and then we'll hear a little of your mum's story, and then we're going to link up with Bill Hern, who's just disappeared at the moment. Can't see him on the screen yet.
So I'm Levi Lawrence. I grew up in Birmingham in Handsworth, but I left the UK in the late 80s and settled in Australia. So I've lived in Australia, in Melbourne, for the last 30 odd years. I'm back in Birmingham now. Obviously, my mother passed away back in April, and we buried her a couple of days ago. So that's why I'm back in Birmingham. So I'm actually back for probably about a year anyway. And my sister has joined me as well. And as she said earlier, she lives in Germany, and she came over for the funeral. So we thought it might be a good idea for both of us to sort of front this on this program. So here we are. So anyway, my just a little bit about my father. So my father, as was said earlier, traveled to the UK back in '48 on the Windrush. I think at the time he saw himself as a bit of a pioneer, looking for a bit of adventure. And I guess growing up in Jamaica, that generation had always looked to England as the sort of ultimate place to sort of travel to and for opportunities. So he left, I think he left with high hopes of becoming a teacher, because before he left, he was actually educated to tertiary level. So I guess for him, he thought that, arrived in England, he'd be able to continue his studies. But anyway, I guess when he arrived in England, life took quite a different turn once he got married and had kids, and found it very difficult to pursue those other lines of study, such as becoming a teacher that he was interested in. So, but he did find a place in the church. I think when he grew up as a Baptist, and then somewhere in the mid-50s in the UK, he joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so he became a bit of a lay preacher, and spent a lot of time doing church work. Whereas my mother, when I say doing church work, mainly out there trying to win souls, I guess. Whereas my mother tended to, when she arrived in the UK back in, I think it was 1952, yes, she arrived. She did a lot of work in the welfare sector.
So that's fantastic, Alette.
When my my father came on the Windrush, and I spoke to him, and I went to the place where he was born and everything in Jamaica. It was really beautiful scenery. And I always wondered, why did he leave Jamaica? Because it was such beautiful, idyllic where he came from. I think that those days, because his brother had left, there were 3 children, and his brother had left Jamaica, and he went to America to work on the cotton fields. So that was leaving him and his sister at home. So I think he saw the opportunity of not going to America, but coming to England. And when he came on the Windrush, and he looked at England as the motherland, as the land where you went to school and you were taught about the English history and everything basically about England. So in those days, because they were, don't forget, England, it was a colony of England. So, England was like basically the mother country. So when he came to England, and this mother country, this mother idea, what they all had, it sort of shattered in a couple of months or a couple of years that it wasn't so. So there's a book also with my father, also with the Windrush, and there's another book with him. It's called The Birmingham Voice Speaks. And he's got his picture in that. I've got that book at home. And he did a small paragraph, and in the paragraph says, why did you come to England? And it says that he came to England because of the mother language, because of the mother country, I mean, and he wanted to know. So, that Windrush, it's the Windrush era that set the foundation of England, because they came to, and the ones who came on the Windrush were the people who, most of them could read, they could write, because the boat went to all different countries on different islands to pick them up, to bring them to England.
Like the cream, they
picked up the cream at that period, that generation to come. So they were all educated, they all went to school, they could read and they could write. So that's how, and when they came here, they thought with that education, what they had, they could improve on that education and do a lot more to the mother country, as they do call it. And they were all, a lot of them were disappointed, did not work out that way. And I think a lot of them never ever came to terms. I don't think my father really did come to terms till the end of his life, that how I think his plan was to be a teacher and to teach and to be in the front, but he had a disappointment. It did not turn out that way. And don't forget, England, don't forget, Europe was just coming through the period of the Second World War, so everything was sort of out of place everywhere. So they, with the dream what they had, that dream was sort of shattered, and the dream became workers. They had to work to build the country,
and manual work,
and they think, well, I didn't come here for the manual. I didn't come here to do manual work. I came basically to learn and to educate myself further. And I think that was a great disappointment to a lot of them. And a lot of them. So after that period, quite a few of them, I wouldn't say a lot of them, went back to re-educate. But the main factor is because of the war, because the war ended in 45 and they came in 48. So everything was to rebuild. So basically, I don't know if they put them on the Windrush on a false pretense, because basically, for me, I saw they put them on that Windrush to come and rebuild that country.
But I guess at the time they're push and pull factors, because it needed workers.
They needed workers.
And Enoch Powell at the time was advertising in the West Indies for workers to go to help rebuild the UK.
But I don't think they were. I don't think they were really clear and complete and truthful. So that's why they've ended up, that's why a lot of them have ended up with the disappointment. If it was clear to them, I think in Jamaica, and said, okay, maybe you can go and further educate yourself, but we're just coming through a war. But I think you will maybe has to start off as a manual worker, because when my mother started, my mother always gives me the joke. She said when she came, she went to a restaurant and she was working there in the kitchen in the restaurant, and she was so fascinated at that. She said, oh, in Jamaica, when we wash the plates, we always rinse the plates. And she said, oh, she said to me, oh, they just, if there was a mark on the plate, they would just put they would spit on their finger and just move the mark. And my mum said to me, I couldn't eat the food after. She said they were spitting on their finger and they were cleaning the plates. And, because that tradition we still have, because we still rinse. You've got to rinse the plate. You can't just spit on the plate, And, at that period of time, when you got married, you went to live with your in-laws, and that was your end of your married life, because you were going to, and my mom said to me, how can it be the end of my married life? Because I'm going to have children, but I need to work further. And that's what it is. So it was a completely different culture shock to them, to what they were used to. And I think that we are the first generation what's born in England. We are the first Windrush children who are born in England. And there's also another lady who I met, and she was the first Black social worker in England. And she came in the time of the war. So there were a lot of educated people also.
I was just going to mention one thing. One of the surprises my father encountered when he arrived. So I think when he grew up in Jamaica, all of his encounters with white people, I think, were more with the sort of middle class people. So he assumed that England was just full of middle class people.
So
I think when he arrived, then he found himself working at factories and so on. He felt that he was way more educated and better read than a lot of the white working class who he'd never encountered before. So I think that was quite a surprise for him. But often he was always under those people at work, and it was very difficult for him, even at work, to get any sort of promotion, and that was more suited to his abilities. So I think that was also part of the struggle, was that having to work at the lower rungs. And obviously that took its toll on my father, because he always felt he should be doing something better, given his abilities. But just, I haven't said much about my mother.
Wait, just a second. I'll just finish off with my father.
Okay.
Because I know we're going to be here the whole day. Because of that educational thing, he became obsessed. He had an obsession of books. And there was books on every subject underneath the sun. And I've got the same thing, because although I live at home in Germany, I've got like a half book library at my home, and I'm always interested. I've always been interested in current affairs, history and geography has always been my strongest thing. And I think that's why. And he got lost into the books, because those books, what he got lost into, those are the books what he should have been teaching the children and telling them what's in the book. So he couldn't do that. So he built up an empire of books and got lost in the books, because those were the books what he wanted to tell the children.
It was just quite interesting, because like my childhood recollections of growing up, when I was growing up in Handsworth, all around the house there were piles of books everywhere.
Books.
And the funny thing was that as kids, we weren't really allowed to touch the books. So it was almost, the books became something sacred.
They were sacred.
The books became sacred, but they were everywhere. everywhere, all over the house. And then
Yeah.
at some stage when we're still quite young, he built a shed in the backyard.
Yeah.
And again, that was filled with books.
And the books in the newspaper. The
too.
newspapers now.
Yeah.
He only had the Gleaner,
the
and he had the Observer,
and the guy,
and the Telegraph,
and the Evening Mail,
and
the Birmingham Evening Mail.
Birmingham Evening Mail, all the conservative, but he was very conservative, but he was a Labour man.
Yeah.
Yes, so that was, so sometimes you think, how can the two get together? And
I think I like the refinedness of the British, the British gentleman.
Yes,
and I think that it's interesting because my mother always spoke Patois, but my father rarely spoke Patois.
He didn't speak it at all. It was banned. It was banned.
It was more about speaking this refined sort of English.
It was more speaking. I remember that growing up, I couldn't speak Patois, and it's when I left home, and then I met loads of my Jamaican friends, and then I learnt myself Patois, and I think it was the best thing I did, because when I went to Jamaica, I'm looking forward to, because of that, I've even taken out a Jamaican passport, and I'm thinking of going to live in Jamaica. Yes, I love Jamaica, and Jamaica's in my heart, and I've been there, and Patois. If I couldn't speak Patois in Jamaica, I would have been lost. And it was so good to speak Patois because I could integrate with the people. I could do it was wonderful. But then on the other hand, I've got my English. But and my German, and my Italian, and my French. Yeah.
All right. I think
I'm just going to step in here and say I could really listen for so long. You're both so enthusiastic, celebrating the life and times of your mum and dad, and with your mum having passed so recently, our condolences to you. But what wonderful memories you have, and what confident people you are. As I say, I met Levi here in Melbourne, and you're living at the moment in Germany and looking to live in Jamaica. What a legacy your mum and dad have left. So Daniel and Ivy Lawrence, they just sound a couple that I would have loved to have met. Sadly, I didn't, but it's lovely to hear you talk about your mum and dad like that. That's really wonderful. So please stay with us, will you, both of you? And thank you so much. But we have with us Bill Hern, who's been researching about the passengers on Empire Windrush. And Bill has now produced the first book, he says, because there were quite a number of passengers, so it's certainly a good read, and it's available free online, isn't it, from the Windrush Foundation. So Bill, and I think the book was also produced with Arthur Torrington. You and Arthur Torrington put the book together, so it's absolutely fantastic. So what I'm going to suggest now, Bill, is that you take it from here, and then we'll have some further discussions when you finish sharing your presentation about the research you've done into all those folks who are on the Windrush sailing.
Thanks, Liz.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. That's great. Right, where are we? So just sort out the screen share here. So this is part of our Windrush series that we're working on. That's wonderful. So we've got a couple of weeks left until the 22nd when we celebrate Windrush Day. Okay, over to you then, Bill.
Okay, thank you, Liz. As you say, it's I co-authored this book with Arthur Torrington and David Cleave as well, who's on leave. David wrote about some of the pioneers, so it was a bit of a team effort. I've been researching the individual passengers for about 4 years now, and I've got another 100 or so to do. So I would expect another year. But almost every single one of them is an amazing story. I mean, Miss Lawrence's is almost typical, that they're inspiring, and the experiences are very, very similar as well. What I wanted to do was to begin by just exploring a few myths, because even yesterday, believe it or not, I read something that said that the Windrush passengers came across with their wives and children, Now, that's absolute nonsense. I mean, these were young West Indians, almost all of them single, and they were pioneers. They were intelligent, as has been said. I mean, it was almost a brain drain of the West Indies because the best young talent was taken away and underused in England. There's no doubt about that. The other thing said that most of them were in the RAF. That isn't true either. Of the West Indian passengers, I would say roughly 1 in 3 were ex-RAF. And the biggest fallacy, really, I'm afraid, is that, you called and we came. We didn't call. We tried everything we could to stop the Windrush. The Windrush took the British government completely by surprise. They knew nothing about it. And they spent a lot of time trying to divert it to Africa, was one attempt. But eventually the government relented because these people were British. They had British passports. They were allowed to come here and work. And Attlee, the Prime Minister, tried to appease the cabinet by saying, don't worry, this is just a one-off. It won't happen again. And the Secretary of State for the Colonies, I think he said that something like, yeah, don't worry, they'll only last one winter and then they'll go back home. So how wrong was that? But I really, it's a lovely romantic version that, you called and we came. And I'd love it to be true, but it isn't the case. We did years later try and get people to come from the West Indies to work in the NHS and so on, but not in 1948. So these people were very brave and pioneering, and they actually had foresight as well because they knew Britain needed rebuilding and they knew they needed resources to do that. So I actually think they were one step ahead of the government. Another fallacy is the tickets. The tickets weren't cut price. They weren't available at the very, very last minute. And again, I read the other day, one of the passengers said, you had to be wealthy to come to England or the Windrush, which takes people by surprise. But £48, the first class ticket, is the equivalent of £1,458 now. And the sort of C class, the one that Mr. Lawrence would have been on, it was the equivalent of £880. And that's a one-way ticket on a troop ship with the most basic of facilities. So it was very, very expensive to get across. And the tickets were on sale long before the Windrush even left Tilbury on the outward journey. So there's no question of them, being late and thinking, well, let's just sell them off. So it's not quite as it's sometimes described. One other thing is I read the other day that Alfred Gardner is the last remaining living passenger, which is nonsense. There are at least 4 of Alfred's generation and background, but throughout the ship, there are probably about 30 or 40 Windrush passengers still alive. There were lots of babies in first class, young children. So there are still a fair few passengers around, but they're dying so quickly. And, it's important that we talk to them and listen to them before they do eventually pass away. Having said all of that, it was a magical ship. I mean, the talent that emerged from that ship, not necessarily but through the passengers, but through their children, their grandchildren, is just totally disproportionate. And I will talk about some of the successes. But I mean, obviously, Mr. Lawrence had a fantastic family, and it's just typical of those pioneers. And they were brave people, and it's not really a surprise that things turned out as well as they did. Let's pretend we're on the Windrush 76 years ago. We've just left Havana, and we're heading for Bermuda. We'll arrive in Bermuda tomorrow. There'll be racism in Bermuda, more so than any of them faced in their home islands. And at one point, the black passengers weren't going to be allowed off the ship, even though it was there for 3 days. But they soon went their own way and got off the ship, went to a cinema where they suffered segregation. So that they didn't have the best of times in Bermuda. The ship had started at Tilbury, not Australia. The ship never went to Australia ever. And the return journey started at Trinidad, not Jamaica. So again, something else that people sometimes get wrong. Oddly enough, the majority of the passengers marginally were white. It was a very, very closely, close balance. But again, surprisingly, there were as many white passengers as black passengers. And if you take the crew into account, it was a predominantly white ship because all the crew members, all 300 crew members, were white. Not all were Jamaican by any means. Obviously, the ship stopped at Trinidad and other places, but not in the West Indies. There were Africans on board who were returning from Trinidad because they'd been to agricultural college there. There were people going on holiday, both white and black people on holiday. The white families tended to work in the West Indies and they were going back to see their families, their parents, and so on. And the black people generally were there for holiday. They were affluent people, and why shouldn't they, go across to England? Some were going across for education, so it isn't the case of everybody was going across to look for work. Age-wise, in C class, where the West Indians were housed in the main, a lot of people think Vince Reid at 13 was the youngest passenger, but there was a young lad called Aston McLachlan, and he was only 9. And the reason he was traveling in C class with all these adults is that he had 2 older brothers who were able to look after him, while his mum went into first class with his sister, because females had to go in first class, males could travel in C class. And Mary McLachlan, Aston's mother, is a very interesting personality. She actually was a very religious lady. And when she came to England, she found she wasn't made welcome at any of the churches. So she basically set up her own church, the Church of God in Christ. And she started in her front room. It extended to hiring halls and eventually churches and so on. So the McLachlan family were pretty important. The oldest passenger on board that I found so far is a lady called Gertrude Whitelaw. She was 80. And the amazing thing about Gertrude Whitelaw, and a very ironic thing, is that she was the grandmother of a future Home Secretary, a Tory future Home Secretary. So I'm not sure that Willie Whitelaw knew that his grandmother had sailed on the Windrush, but I do find it a bit ironic that a Home Secretary on the Tory side was on the Windrush. The Windrush only made one journey to the West Indies and back. And a lot of people think that all the ships that went backwards and forwards in the 40s and 50s were the Windrush, but the Windrush only made the one journey. The passenger list has 1,027 passengers, but I'm discovering there are an awful lot more than that. I mean, we know there are 15 identifiable stowaways, but there are names that we know were on the ship that aren't on the passenger list. So I think you're probably looking more at 1,400, 1,500 passengers possibly. But let's look at some of the individual passengers. Right, this guy, well, can you guess which one was on the Windrush? I'm sure everybody recognizes JFK, Kennedy, President of the United States. The man with him, who looks as if it's his house, it isn't, it's the White House, is Ellis Clark, and he was a passenger on the Windrush. He went on to become the very first president of Trinidad and Tobago, and his photograph here is when he was ambassador to the United States. And one of the stories about Ellis is that I don't know if it's called an embassy or a consulate in the case of Trinidad, but anyway, the accommodation he was going into, he wasn't allowed to occupy because Negroes, to use their terminology, were not allowed to live in the premises. So they had to get basically the deeds changed to allow Ellis and his family to live there. Ellis and Dr. Eric Williams were the creators, really, or the architects of the independent Trinidad and Tobago. So he's an incredibly important figure in West Indian politics. He'd gone to university in London before the war. And when war broke out, London University was shifted to Aberystwyth, where obviously it was safer. Aberystwyth wasn't subject to a blitz. So he completed his training in England and Wales, and he was coming back on the Windrush with his mum to have a family break. So he was here for recreational purposes. He never lived in England as such. But he's you can see he's a confident guy. This is him telling Pele how we should be playing football. But he was at home at any sort of he was at home with Kennedy. You can see from his stance, and he's equally at home telling Pele and other internationals how to play football. So it usually takes people by surprise that a man of Ellis Clark's stature was on the Windrush. This man wasn't on the Windrush. This man is MacDonald Bailey, a very famous and successful athlete. But who was on the Windrush was his father. And his father was coming across solely to watch his son run in the Olympics. The 48 Olympics were in London because no other city really could host it after the war. It was going to be in Tokyo, but for obvious reasons, that wasn't suitable. Helsinki were going to try and take it, but they couldn't. So at the very last minute, London came in and said, we'll host the Olympics. Now, MacDonald Bailey was from Trinidad, and he had a very difficult decision to make because the 48 games were the first ones where Trinidad and Tobago and the other West Indian islands were allowed to enter their own teams. Prior to that, they'd always run under the Great Britain banner. So MacDonald Bailey had a choice. He could run for Trinidad and Tobago, or he could run for Great Britain. And after a lot of heartache, he decided to run for Britain. He was a medal prospect. He had a really, really good chance of winning the medal. And a guy called Arthur Wint, who some of you will have heard of, a Jamaican, he had the same dilemma. Did he run for Jamaica? Did he run for Britain? Wint opted for Jamaica, and he won a gold medal in the 400 meters, very first gold medal Jamaica ever won. MacDonald Bailey opted to run for Great Britain. He wasn't fully fit. He finished 8th in the final of the 100 meters, but 4 years later at Helsinki, he won the bronze medal. So his dad was across to watch him. As soon as he'd watched him, he got on a ship and he went back to Trinidad. 3rd of August, 48, he was away. So he was here for one reason only. But one of the oddities is in 1946, in the European Games in Norway, MacDonald Bailey and Arthur Wint were chosen for the Great Britain team. Both were refused entry because of the colour of their skin, which is more remarkable when you consider both were serving in the RAF at the time. So even in 1946, the racism was just, well, quite unbelievable, really. Happy to allow them to risk their lives, but not to run in the European Games. This is a commercial break. This is Mona Baptiste, who was a Trinidadian singer and actor. David and I are her biographers, so we know a lot about Mona. She came to England on the Windrush, very, very quickly moved to the continent. She was a huge success in Europe, particularly in Germany. She married an Englishman, and he was a very bad man. He just served 7 years in Maidstone prison for jewellery theft. What makes him unusual was he was a public school boy, and in those days, people thought public school boys couldn't possibly commit offences. He also got 20 lashes of the cat of nine tails, and that's in 1937, which is again a surprise. This split up. He was killed in a car crash in 1958, and Mona remarried an Irishman and went to live in Dublin. And she died in 1993. Her husband is still alive, amazing guy, become quite a close friend, really, which is typical of this exercise of looking at doing the research. So many people are so proud of what their mums, their dads, their granddads have achieved. They just want to, we know from the Lawrence family, you just want to talk about them, and remember them. So I was saying to Liz earlier, later on today, I'm ringing somebody whose grandfather was on the Windrush, and he wants to talk about his granddad. But the really strange thing is he plays for the Jamaican curling team. Whoever thought Jamaica had a curling team? But it's amazing what comes out of the Windrush. So the next stop after Trinidad was Jamaica. And I want to talk about some success stories, some amazing success stories. This guy is Everard Peart, and that's his wife, Doreen. Now, typical in the research, people use nicknames, don't they? And Everard's family said nobody ever in the history of time called him Everard. He was Ralph to everyone else. And that's fairly typical of a lot of the passengers, which does make research a bit more difficult. Everard's background, or Ralph's background, is that when he was young, he would walk from Mandeville to Kingston, about 59 miles, to sell produce from the small holding the family had. He was expelled from school before he completed his education because he jumped to the defense of his sister and bit the teacher. He came across on the Windrush. When he got here, he had one suitcase and 10 shillings, which was worth about £24 then. Stayed in the deep shelter at Clapham South with about another 136 or so people. And it was lovely. We were able to take his children to the deep shelter last year, take them down into the deep shelter with the bunks and everything. And it must have been very emotional to see where your dad was in 1948 when he first arrived in England without any friends, any money, anything really. He moved across to Gloucester under the direction of the Labour scheme. They were sent to where the jobs were, and he met Doreen, and they married, and they moved to Reading. And there were a lot of mixed marriages because there weren't many black women in England for the to meet. And they suffered terrible racism. And Doreen, who's still alive, said that one day a lady came up to her totally unprompted. She didn't know who the lady was. And she said, "If you were my daughter, I'd wish you dead." And, and that happened. It happened more than once. But given Ralph's background, his son became a King's Counsel, the very, very top of the legal profession. His daughter became a leading educator, a justice of the peace, an author, an academic. And this is not untypical of the families that came from the Windrush. They were taught, some families were told as children, you're going to be a solicitor, you're going to be a doctor. And that's how it worked out. They had to work hard. And so whereas Ralph came across and really just kept his head down and worked and worked and worked, the reason he was doing that was to make sure that his kids got a good education and they achieved everything they were capable of achieving. So, and they're all heroes, really. Ralph's not that exceptional. Another example is Delissa Bernard, who is still alive, lives in Wolverhampton. And this is one of the portraits that it was Prince Charles at the time, King Charles now, commissioned of Windrush generation men and women. And this portrait has been in the National Gallery for a while. It is going to be hung in a royal palace. I'm not sure which one at some point. But Delissa, again, is another quiet man. In himself, he didn't achieve anything. He worked hard. He was a good father, a good husband. But his children, one, Verona Bernard, Verona Elder was her married name. She ran for Britain in the Olympics. She won gold medals in the Commonwealth Games. And his son Delissa employs thousands, and I mean literally thousands of people. So he's been a successful entrepreneur. And his other two children, one became a firefighter and the other one a nurse. So it's typical of the legacy of the West Indian passengers on the Windrush. Right. I don't know if I'm obscuring. There's a man in the right as you're looking at it. He's playing a double bass. He is called Joseph Ignatius Armstrong, for some reason known as Wayne Armstrong. And he was a double bass player in a band called the Commandos in Jamaica. And the band leader, who was the man with the microphone, heard about the Windrush, and he wanted to get his entire band to move across to England. because he thought, we'd be a huge success there. Wayne didn't want to go. Wayne's ambition was to play the double bass in the nightclubs of New Orleans. But eventually, Delroy, who's the guy there, Delroy Stevens, persuaded him and many members of his band to jump in the Windrush and come across. And it was the best thing Wayne ever did, really, because when he got here, he met a lady called Millie, and he fell madly in love. And they had 7 daughters, all of whom doted on him. He continued his music, but only in Liverpool. He never wanted to spend a night away from home. And, it was a huge, just a lovely story. And when he died, he donated his double bass to the Paul McCartney music college. So that will not be forgotten. But his wife, this is Millie, her father was an Indonesian seaman, and he was a Muslim. And Millie joined the WAF. And this is almost unbelievable. When Belsen, the concentration camp, was relieved, Millie was one of the few females that went into the camp. So those eyes have seen, a lot of bad things. And in itself, I think there's probably a story to be written about them. But they had an amazingly happy life, both dead now. But 7 children who went on to be successful midwives, nurses, you name it, all benefiting society. Not everybody was a success, though. There was a guy, he is a male, Lorraine Rochester, and it just didn't work out for him in England. He was made homeless. He had no money. He begged the British authorities, the Jamaican authorities for money to get him back home. And in the end, he had to resort to stowaway. So he actually stored away to return to Jamaica, having arrived here from the Windrush. I gather that his life turned out really well in Jamaica, so it's a happy ending. But it is fair to say that of the passengers that came across, quite a lot went back, not necessarily to the West Indies, but certainly to the States, to Canada. So not everybody fitted in, but because they were pioneers and they travelled 4,000 miles anyway, that, well, okay, didn't work out here, let's try the States. They're really, really pioneering people. Just jumping ahead now to Bermuda, because over 160 people got on board in Bermuda. Probably 168 of them were white. A lot of them were dockyard workers who'd been working on secondment in Bermuda. So if you look at the passenger list on the Windrush, you'll find a lot of people with a Plymouth address or a Chatham address. That doesn't mean there's an enclave of West Indians in Plymouth and Chatham. Simply means there were dockyard workers returning to their home after what must have been a nice secondment of 12 or 13 months working in Bermuda. The family here are the Rain family, who some of the older people remember Rain as the shoemaker to the Queen. And apparently they had the most fancy shops you can imagine. I think a little bit like Hamley's at Christmas time. People would look through the windows and see how fantastic it was. And the man on our right with the glasses is Edward Rain. He was head of the empire, Sir Edward Rain, and the lady to his right is the lady that was in Bermuda, Phyllis Court. Now Phyllis was an actress. Nobody has any idea why she was in Bermuda, and she was joined by her mother and her sister in Bermuda to come back to England. Again, it's a bit of a mystery because her mother and sister only arrived in New York when the Windrush was just outside of Trinidad. So they must have jumped onto another ship to get them to Bermuda in order to meet Phyllis and get the Windrush back to England. And it is a mystery to the Rain family. I've tried to work out why Phyllis was there, but we don't know. But Phyllis married Edward Rain in 1952. She became Lady Phyllis. So it was a real rags to riches story because she wasn't a successful actress. And her mum, Minnie, who is the older lady sitting in the sitting in front of her, I think was a shopkeeper, whereas the Rain family were the creme de la creme shoemakers to the Queen. This guy was on the Windrush, got on up Bermuda, and the reason I've included him because he's got quite a unique link with the Verdala, which is probably the second most famous West Indian ship. The Verdala, for those of you that don't know, in 1916 was taking Jamaican troops to England for World War One, and it got caught in a blizzard for various reasons. And the troops were really ill-equipped for the blizzard. And I think around about 5 died. Many, many more got frostbite. And the ship stopped at Bermuda to allow the injured to be treated. And William Tucker, the doctor here, is a surgeon. He performed 150 amputations in a month. Now, the Verdala story is that it sort of limped back to Jamaica. And when the Jamaicans saw these people getting off with bandaged arms, legs, whatever, it obviously didn't do very much for recruitment. But William Tucker has a link with the Verdala and also a link with the Windrush because he was a passenger on the Windrush with his wife, Henrietta, who was a very famous suffragette in Bermuda. And she went on to get an MBE later in life. William Tucker was the uncle of Henry Tucker, the first Premier of Bermuda and one of their national heroes. So distinguished man. He played rugby for England, and his son went on to play rugby for England as well. And there is a sort of sporting theme in the Windrush. Quite a lot of people, children and grandchildren, went on to be successful in the sporting field, but even more in music. I mean, you could do an entire 2 hours just talking about musicians on board the Windrush, but don't worry, we won't. Right, there are no calls in the Windrush 75 book, but there were 66 got on board in Tampico, and women and children who basically worked their way from Siberia to get to Mexico. They were displaced. They'd lost their homes in Poland, had a terrible time, really. Most of them that came to England stayed in hostels very briefly and ended up in Chicago. Most of them decided to emigrate to Chicago in the States. Stowaways, this is Evelyn Wauchope, the most famous stowaway. A lot of people have heard of her. She was the only female stowaway, which is what I think made her particularly famous. There were 15 stowaways arrested when they arrived in Tilbury, so we know their names, so they'll form part of the research. But there was still an awful lot more that we don't know about. Those of you that remember the Spinners, the sort of folk group, the Spinners, there's a man called Cliff Hall in the Spinners. Cliff was on the Windrush, but he's not on the passenger list. So the conclusion is that he was a stowaway. Evelyn is another one that she didn't stay in England very long. She married in England and went across to the States and made a real success of her life in the States. The lady getting married here with the bouquet of flowers is Joyce Poultney. She was born in Jamaica. She's now marrying in Jamaica. That's her husband Jim on her right. And Joyce died last year. She was a marvelous lady, and the reason she's there is that she is on the passenger list, and she tells me that she went into this cabin and she was asked to share with two elderly ladies that she'd never seen before in her life. So that, that shows you the kind of thing, the kind of accommodation there was. Jim, we know, was on board because he was in C class with the rest of the troops, but he's not on the passenger list. And this is not uncommon. There were 10 Royal Navy midshipmen got on the ship. I know that because one of them's still alive and I've spoken to him, interviewed him. 5 are on the passenger list, 5 are not. There's no logical explanation for that. But clearly there were a lot of people on board that ship that are not on the passenger list. And Jim wasn't on the passenger list, and he got to meet his new wife 1 hour a day for the roughly 32-day journey. Right, this is the crew. I covered one crew member in the Windrush 75 book, and it's Peter Deelan. I'm not sure again whether you can see him on our right. He was the youngest crew member on board the Windrush. He was only 16, and he's standing next to Lord Kitchener when Lord Kitchener has that famous interview and sings "London is a place for me." Can you imagine being that close to history? And he's never ever going to be forgotten. And I mean, I got to know Peter really well, and I asked him, "What were you thinking?" And I guess, like any 16-year-old, he said, "Well, nothing really." It was, but yeah. And Peter went on to be a very successful builder in Essex, and he was a collector of Windrush memorabilia. And he died last year. And shortly before he died, I was with him when we handed all the possessions across to the Essex Record Office. So I just got a feeling he looked like he was thinking mission accomplished when he handed it across, because he knows that that's going to be looked at, for generations to come. And we did talk about, Windrush 100. I think people will be making a beeline to Essex Record Office to look at all the material So that's a run through, really. Some of the passengers that got on at Trinidad, Jamaica, Bermuda, stowaways, and one crew member. But my overriding feeling is that this is a really, really special ship with special people, and Britain in particular, and not just Britain, because a lot of the family members have gone across to Europe, to America, and so on. It's just the Windrush has got a lot for us to be thankful for. So, end of presentation.
That was just amazing. Bill, you've joined Black History Conversations a number of times over the endless sessions we've run, and it's never fails to surprise me. But this was really special, this presentation, because you emphasised so much how very special the passengers were, so many of the passengers. And imagine 32 days interacting with so many other amazing people. Absolutely fantastic. So over to the rest of you. Thank you, Bill, for that. That was wonderful. So what questions, points, stories have you got to raise? And welcome to Mr. Barnes from Why Are West Indians Here, who's arrived to join us today, which is really wonderful. So thanks very much. And we've got Earl Beswick as well, and June Elizabeth White-Smith. We've got a good lot of folks with us. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Do you want to stop your screen sharing now then, Bill, and we can see what questions we've got or points we want to add? Right, so okay, right. So it's great to have you here, Mr. Barnes. So come on, tell us a little bit about your story and introduce yourself.
While he's unmuting, Horace's uncle has a chapter in the Windrush 75 book. So Horace's uncle is a really important person in terms of Black history, the Windrush, and the Midlands.
Right, okay. So Horace, it's lovely to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yes, we haven't seen you since we danced together last year.
No, this was true. This was true. I'm coming back over. Hope there's some celebrations this year.
Yeah, there is. I mean, we're going full pelt. I mean, I just want to pick up on one thing. Certain people, well, to support Bill, really, certain people taking up the historical journey, but they really don't know enough about it, and they're making assumptions, and it's causing us great problems. The Why West Indian Project logo is Britain called and we answered. Well, people are manipulating that and using that for Windrush. It's not to do with Windrush. It includes Windrush, but it actually for 500 years of supporting Britain. So that's the proper title. Britain called and we answered. And like Bill picked up there, there's just too many people out there that are taking the journey in the wrong direction, and it could hurt us. But On the other hand, yeah, we've got a flag raising on the 22nd. There's a Windrush Carnival also on the same day. We've got a dinner and dance on the 15th. We're doing a talk at the Repertory Theatre with the Rush Theatre Company on the 28th. The list just goes on. The 12th of July, we're in Panacroft here in Birmingham. I hear that sometime some group are going to Parliament. Our Welsh colleagues are going to Parliament. So, thank you, Liz, for continuing doing what you're doing, especially Dave and Bill. It's just brilliant, and I'm glad so many people are now pulling together to try and make this world a better place. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Horace. It's really lovely to see you again, and I'm really looking forward. I've been putting off coming back to the UK. I'm here in Australia with my family, but yes, I've now booked my ticket on the 19th. I'm just hoping that I'm going to be able to come along to some of the Windrush things in the West Midlands, because I'll be in the West Midlands to begin with. So that'll be really exciting. And then we'll be able to do things in Wales as well when the Welsh Government gets round to allocating the funding for this year. The Windrush funding for activities for this year in Wales still hasn't been confirmed. And I think that's a real issue. Anyway, so over to anyone else. So Garrick, I haven't seen you for a while. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Liz. Been away for 4 weeks or so. Not away on vacation out the country, but 4 weeks with my mother and family members. And interesting what Bill has just referred to at his final comments was about the Windrush 100. That is the website we're now using to promote the Windrush events. We've done the 75 and it's now Windrush 100. The website for that is just windrush100.org. So people can have a look at that. What I found quite interesting with Bill's presentation, that we have a bit more details on the passenger list, and in particular the unnamed people or the ones that's not listed. I think that's a good insight for us to understand about. We always thought 1,027 passengers, but we now realize that there were far more than 1,027. I noticed, Bill, you didn't mention the Polish numbers, because we believe that I think it was around 65 Polish on the ship. Can we confirm that, Bill?
Bill, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, there was 66 on board. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And they got picked up in Tampico in Mexico.
Yeah. And also, I didn't realize the youngest member being 9 years old. So that's a good bit of information. It's always good for us to have, accurate records, because we're talking about living history, because it's still alive, and what we try to do on this platform during Black Conversation is to really put Black conversation in a context of British history. We don't like to separate history. We want to make sure that it's part of the British history. And when we have these conversations about, those Windrush pioneers that contribute to Britain, we need to make sure that people understand those contributions. And I think, the work you're doing certainly is a excellent way for people to get a better understanding as they engage with the wider community about these issues. We're particularly interested in the descendants, and we talk about Windrush in the sense of first generation, second generation, third, fourth, fifth, etc. I'm second generation, and spending 4 weeks with my mom this month, I learned some new things about the family I didn't know. I didn't realize that we had an uncle who arrived in 1949 in Britain. And from 1949 to 57, we had 9 family members coming to the UK. So I learned something new about my family. My mom is now 89, and I have auntie 91, 92 who are still alive. So, you know, it's good when we can make these connections with our families, you know, who are living history in relation to Windrush. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so sad that I lost 2 last year. You know, I lost Peter Dealing and I lost Joyce Poultney, and it was lovely to be able to turn to them and ask them questions about, you know, what did the ship, how was the ship laid out and things like that. And hopefully Peter's left enough enough papers and documents. But yeah, we've got to get this while we still can.
Yeah, and the work that the Windrush Foundation is doing is so important. I always direct people to the educational resource because an excellent resource for people to use. One of the difficulty with Black history, most teachers don't have material or don't know where to find material. Now we can direct them to where they can actually find resources so they can teach and bring these stories alive.
Fantastic, thanks very much then. So I'm not sure if it's Roxanne or if it's David. Would you like to join us? Oh, Roxanne, lovely.
Hello, Argleave, that's yours truly. Oh, where do I begin? There's so many things. I think I'll go back to what you said, Liz, about where do we go from here and what can we do? Well, I think David and possibly Bill are tired hearing me saying there is a film to be made here. No doubt. The musicians that Bill touched upon, because at the moment people are just holding on to, you know, London is a place for me, when there was so much more music. So in my film, in my head, there are the musicians. There are also locations. Again, Bill touched upon this, and David and I have been into the deep shelter, and to walk in the footsteps and to just have an idea is so powerful. And we've also walked the plank at Tilbury. So for the film, the locations are there. I know I'm selling it to the audience here, but it's a matter of who's going to pick up and produce that film, because film seems to be the way to go. Sadly, we can't be on board the Windrush, and I'm sure possibly somewhere there are other ships that could be made to look like the Windrush. And something about ships that's sort of, I'm sure when I speak to Bill, he'll be able to answer. Cunard, Nancy Cunard was on board there. Why on earth would a Cunard decide to travel on the Windrush? There's obviously some reason behind that. Let me have another quick look at what I've written down here. And Peter, just on an off chance, I was able to have a conversation with Peter. And one of the questions that I put to him was, can you tell me something about the food? Again, that's an uncharted area. The passengers on board would have had to have been fed. And we don't seem to, there are no menus, there's nothing telling us. And quite honestly, when I was at school and I was given Eve's pudding, I didn't have a clue what that was. I thought, why are they saying, you're going to enjoy Eve's pudding? And just in a similar vein, what were the passengers on board given? Peter said he was in the bakery and he was, his section was in charge of making puddings, bread and cakes. He wasn't sure what was happening in another area of the Windrush where they were preparing the main meals. So that is an eye-opener, that there was more than one area where meals were prepared. And I think my last point, if I can find it, is education. Gary Young on the 22nd of June, Saturday the 22nd of June, is, one moment, is the guest speaker for something called Legacy of Windrush, Education and Beyond. And that's being sponsored by the National Education Union, and it will be at the London School of Economics and Political Science. So the comment about teachers having resources in order to deliver things that are factually true about the Windrush. Yes, they can go onto the Windrush Foundation, and I know what's on there. But to also have somebody like Gary Young presenting on the second, what I'll do is I'll ask David to put a link into the chat so that others can have a look. I'm not sure if it's just open to members of the NEU. If it is, that would be a travesty, but we'll put it in the chat so people can follow it up. That's it. Thank you.
Liz, can I answer the question about Nancy Cunard? Why she was travelling? I mean, we can't be certain why, but she'd more or less been disowned by her family, and part of that was because of her sympathies towards Black poets and Black people generally. So her family weren't too happy with her. She had a very addictive personality, and she died a very sad death. Lying in a gutter in Paris, weighing next to nothing. So she was not, the family had probably given up on her. She did share a cabin with Freya Stark, who went on to become Dame Freya Stark, and she lived to be 100, oddly enough. So I think, and the other thing was that she'd been living in Barbados, and was probably a rare opportunity to get back to England almost directly, getting on the ship at Trinidad and so on. When I asked Pete about the food, he said the only real difference was in first class, you got waiter service, and in C class, you didn't. And he said, but by and large, he said the food was pretty much the same across the board. But yeah, little questions like this, he's gone now. We can't ask him anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I'll just add about Cunard. I mean, I think we need to remember there weren't that many ships traveling in those days, actually. So it was, as I think Bill suggested, really quite a rare opportunity to get back to England. So I don't think there's any great mystery as to why she was on the ship. I have put a few links in the chat already to things Bill alluded to. I mean, I think what I always like to emphasize is that there was a Black history in Britain long before the Windrush, and I don't think anybody on this call would be unaware of that. But the Vidala was an example that he touched on. And there's a link to an article about the Vidala that I've put in the chat facility.
Okay, I've added that up here on the screen so people can see.
Yeah.
And that's on your fabulous website, historicalroots.com.
The only other thing I was going to say was about the food. Roxanne did speak to Peter some time ago, and I stumbled across the recording of that conversation by chance the other day. And so I probably, with Roxanne's help, I probably ought to type that up just to get Peter's thoughts about the food, kind of on the record. Sorry to interrupt, Liz.
No, it's all right. I just made a little PowerPoint slide of the comment that you'd made. I'd looked up on your website. So thank you very much indeed for that, David. And there's lots of other fascinating information on historicalroots.com. So over to you, Rose. Rose is on the HMS. What's your ship called that you're going around the Norwegian Sea? Look, you've got to unmute yourself. No, try again. Have to work out how to unmute yourself on your phone. Right. Well, while you're unmuting yourself, just to say that Rose is sailing at this very moment in time. So you're doing your own Windrush tour. Oh dear, you need to sort that out. Right. Any chance? I'm sure you'll manage it in a minute. We've got Earl with us while you're sorting that out. Earl, just introduce yourself, will you?
I'm Rose's brother.
Oh, right. Lovely, lovely.
Here,
Well, just tell Rose.
in sunny France.
Oh, right. That was it. I recognise your picture. Yes, you were with us last week when we had the wonderful teachers. Rose, I'm so sorry we can't hear you until you can manage to. Yeah. Rose, put a little message in the chat, will you, Rose? And then we'll work it from there. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
One of the things that always bugs me is that with this National Windrush Day, etc., why is it that there isn't a governmental edict or at least something directing the National Archives to bring this information together legally from places like Cunard, like the insurance companies, just so that they have to preserve these records, and we don't end up in a scenario where, a la Theresa May, records being destroyed, etc. Why is it now we don't have that as part of National Windrush Day, where it becomes part of the, if you like, the demonstration of our inclusion?
I think it's a really good point, and I think that as Windrush Day becomes more established, and the profile of National Windrush Day needs to be really maintained, because otherwise it's going to be very easy for it to slip. I gave the example earlier of how in Wales it's only about, I think, 10 days ago that they closed the applications for funding to enable organisations to run events to recognise Windrush Day.
The frustrating thing is, although Windrush, as everybody rightly says, is not it's not a be all and end all, because things happened before and since.
Yes.
The issue around it is, if they're going to, as part of their penance, if you like, allocate a day, I don't see why that you're allocating a day for a reason, and therefore it has to be part of the national records and the National Archives that this information is brought together. What's included and prior and post is by all means. Listen, I'm a strictly a consumer listening to you all and enjoying it. I'm not involved in the doing. But it just seems to me, it's a frustration I've had since the debacle of records being destroyed and people not having information that the government itself had, etc. So that is just my beef, if you like, listening to.
But I think, Earl, I think it's a really good point, because, sorry, I'm butting in now, but my question earlier was, what next? And this is a good point. So that, issues need to be identified and that they need to be looked at, and also to set it into the whole context. I'm here in Australia, and many of you will know about £10 poms that white people from Britain, not black people, white people from Britain after the Second World War were encouraged to come here to Jamaica. I think in the 1950s. I'm a bit vague on my history here. But the numbers were phenomenal. No wonder we needed extra workers in Britain if about 1 million white British people were distributed around the world to increase the white percentage of the populations in British colonies. It's just
not to mention the kids in care. Not to mention the kids in care in Australia.
Oh, not to mention the kids who were brought over here under false pretenses that they were perhaps orphans, and then have discovered in later life that they've actually got their parents back in Britain. Yes, there's been a number of sorries going on over here as well as in other parts of the world.
Yeah,
okay, so yeah.
Yeah, just an observation as strictly as a consumer, not as a participant in terms of getting involved and doing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so we've got another point here. So we've got also on historical roots, we've got Evelyn Warchup's story. So that should be interesting. And while Dave's at it with his fast fingers, there's a piece on the Falter family, who are Polish, and details of the NEU, National Education Union event that's going on. Now, we've also got Floella Benjamin as chair of the Windrush Commemoration Committee. She unveiled a statue in Waterloo Station by sculptor Basil Watson as a National Windrush Monument. So I'm just going to share the screen and share something with you about that. Let me just escape a minute and then get back to the one I want. Oopsie daisy.
Yeah, remember I was there, Liz, as well, at the unveiling.
Yes, okay. Please, June Elizabeth, talk while I'm finding this anyway. Talk about that, please, will you? And then I'll come to you, Garrick.
Yes, I really had a different impression of Floella, because I thought she had finished with all the people, and I went to talk to Mr. Gardner, you know, the gentleman that was on the ship, and she was getting them ready and to meet Prince William and Kate, which I didn't even know they were attending. And so she came up to me, says like I was interrupting their rehearsal. And she very nicely said to me, you know, oh, we're in the middle of a rehearsal, you know. So later on, I got a lovely picture with Mr. Gardner at Waterloo that day. And unfortunately, I fell down the escalators, so I nearly met my Waterloo, but I'm still here to tell the tale.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm just going to show you this on my PowerPoint that we've been following up, and then I'll come back to the rest of you. We've been following up what's going on in Jamaica, because last year with the 75 in Jamaica, there was events and activities going on. So this is the unveiling this year of the Windrush flag on the waterfront in Jamaica. But just to say, after the after the unveiling of the statue in London, that a replica of the Windrush Monument at Waterloo Station is to be mounted in downtown Kingston next year. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we had Rudy Page join us on Black History Conversations, and he was the person who did a lot in Jamaica last year for the 75th anniversary. And this year, less so, but also when we were talking about whether we perhaps even all whole club together and get a plaque to put. Rose was keen on doing this, but there's going to be a call for funding to be able to produce this replica of the monument, and it's going to be mounted, as I say, in downtown Kingston. So yeah, there's a few other mentions there about that. So yeah, that's my bit of news. Okay then, so over to you, Garrick.
Just a couple of points in response to the points made regarding what next and how can we preserve the Windrush history and also information and records available through government. I will take that to the 100 committee because we have bi-monthly meetings, and I will bring it there to make sure that the committee is on the same page with these issues. There's a number of issues we're discussing going beyond the 75th up into the 100, which is the next millennium, as it were. So I think it's an excellent point to raise there, and I'm sure we will get some responses.
Thank you very much indeed, Garrick. That's really, really helpful. So if anybody's got any other bright ideas. Now, Roxanne, I think you're next.
Yeah, I put the Floella Benjamin in. I think it was Earl who said about what was happening. And I know that in 2018, the then Prime Minister, Theresa May, handed over or made available a sum of money, and Floella became the person who was organising the commemoration. And that was in 2018. And obviously the statue is there. Now in 2022, so basically the statue was commissioned in, or Floella was commissioned in 2018, and it was unveiled in 2022. And as far as I'm concerned and aware, the Windrush Commemoration Committee is still in existence. So possibly they are the ones that should be approached and request from us what actually is happening, because I think it was a government initiative and Floella was chosen alongside of, I think, Reverend Rose Hudson, but Elizabeth June would remember. So sorry you fell down those stairs. I know them very well. Quite a few influential people are part of the commemoration committee, but I don't know what they think their brief is. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
I apologize for interrupting, but
no problem.
It's about the committee is fine to do a statue, but the end, ultimately, we're talking about education, we're talking about information. So if part of all the Windrush specific activities don't stem from records held not only by government, but also by the insurance companies, by the shipping lines, and or airlines, because all of them have to be lodged with their insurers every time they get on a plane or get on a boat. So all that information exists. It's just making sure that it's legally held and not, as we say, destroyed or misplaced or mislaid. That was, for me, getting a specific so that there is that somebody says, yes, we have it. Yes, you're obliged to keep the records. And we don't have the scenario of everybody's WhatsApp messages disappearing from their phone when the time comes to review their activities, a la post office, a la COVID inquiry.
Yes.
Can I just
Earl, would you like to, just before David comes in, Earl, would you like to just word what we would ask the National Records Office?
Mhm.
I'm not really the person to put words together, but I'd be very happy to be, to come back in our next session of Black History Conversations with some words that we could put forward. That might be really a helpful way to move us on with this. Thank you so much, Earl.
No problem.
Thank you. You've got my email address, because I'm always sending things out.
Right
Okay.
at this moment, I'm a consumer, so I have nothing other than I join the meetings.
Look, you've made a very, very positive suggestion, a reflection, and we appreciate that. David, and then Horace. David first.
Okay, I mean, what I wanted to say on the subject of what next, I think we've got at least 3 people on this call who are to do with sort of repairing the damage of the Windrush, so-called Windrush scandal. I mean, the obvious thing to do, and I'm sure they've already done it, is to ask the main political parties to put in their manifestos for the general election what their proposals are for rectifying the situation for the victims of the Home Office Windrush scandal. I fully expect none of those political parties to do that, but following the general election, I should think there would be an opportunity to push against the door of the new government and urge them to look at the legislation that's still in place, all the racist legislation that was used to sort of attack people of the Windrush generation. It wouldn't actually cost anything to have a look at that legislation and change it, and to try and stop this sort of thing going on any further. And of course, there's still the question of all the people who are entitled to compensation who still haven't received it. And as I say, there's at least 3 people on this call who are far better placed than me to talk about that. But that, to me, is the way forward, to try and tackle that scandal.
Yeah, quite right. And I'm sure Garrick's going to come in a moment. I'm just aware that Rose is still trying to get through to us. Rose, I can see your hand up. Oh, yes.
I can. Oh, finally. Just, it was technically my end, definitely. I just want to, I am trying to manage my confusion. One is the ship itself, the Windrush ship, people on it, they're children of the people who are on that ship. And then there's the Windrush generation scandal. And the scandal doesn't just affect those who traveled on the ship and their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but there's a whole group of us who didn't travel on the Windrush ship, who came to the UK later on and have been caught up in the scandal. So when we're using these sorts of words, phrases, I sometimes get myself into a bit of a tiz about it, because I'm going, what are we talking about now? Are we talking about the scandal? Are we talking about the pioneers? I mean, Bill, I really enjoyed listening to Bill's presentation about the facts. Who traveled? Where were they from? When? Where did the ship actually go to? And what were the 1,300, not just the 1,207, but the others as well. So I think sometimes a little bit of clarity would be helpful in my head about what we're talking about, and the effects of these many and various celebrations, organizations, so to avoid some confusion. Maybe it's just me. I'm probably the only person confused by some of this, and it worries me, because I think one, is it Horace, who spoke about they came and we answered or whatever. I mean, and that isn't the way it happened. In fact, at that time, they did get the call and came later. But, it's just sometimes we just need to just slow it down and be clear in our conversation. And as I say, maybe it's just me being confused.
Rose, I don't think it is you being confused. I'm just going to say one thing, and that is that we've have a series, we've run it the last couple of years, where we start the series when the Windrush left Jamaica. Okay, we do focus on Jamaica. And we take about, 6 sessions until the Windrush has arrived at Tilbury. So this session is specifically about the ship, but you are absolutely right that we then talk about the Windrush generations and the Windrush scandal, and it's all gets quite confusing. But I'm going to leave this to others to respond to, Roland's just put in a very good point in that there's lots of work going on about the Windrush compensation scheme. Thank you very much indeed, Roland. You've put more in the chat again then. So who wants to go first, June, Elizabeth or Garrick?
Quite happy.
Either of
June, Elizabeth, would you like to go ahead?
Okay. Yes. Okay. What I was going to say, as Garrick has put certain websites on, we won't take up the time, but the Windrush ship, and I thank you very much, Bill, for your wonderful presentation, and I really enjoyed. I tried to download the book the other day. It was fascinating, so that's what I want to thank you for your presentation. Now, Rose, you're not the only one that's confused, because you've got the Windrush ship, and as it was stated earlier, I think Bill stated, there's lots of other ships that came. Now, when you talk about the Windrush scandal, that is a different category in the sense of the legality of it. To claim compensation or to get your Windrush status, you've got to meet the criteria of coming to this country between a certain time, 1948 and 73, and before 1988 was when you've got to be naturalized. So you've gone into immigration issues there. But a lot of people think the Windrush scandal only affects Caribbean, Black people, Africans. It affects anyone who fits into that time frame. Yes, and I think Garrett has explained it quite a few times on this platform. I mean, Italians, I've had Italian clients, that came over in that frame time. So it's not necessary if you're caught up in the Windrush scandal, that doesn't mean you had anything to do with the Windrush ship. And why I say we don't say Windrush scandal, we say the government, they made the scandal. Because later on, as a historian, people are going to look and say, well, let's have a look at the scandal that these Windrush people made. Right? So sometimes we know our history is put down incorrectly and it is reversed, So there are different pockets, and some people get mixed up when you say Windrush. That's a quick way to explain from my angle. And I just wanted to point out, when Liz showed that presentation of the Windrush flag being raised in Kingston, I was talking to Nigel today, because I'm doing a presentation at Scotland Yard on Monday on the work that I do, just a small presentation because I got a Windrush event. So he made me a special slide to send to the Met. And I just wanted to say, because it needs to be said, Nigel Guy and the Windrush Generation UK in Bradford, they self-funded themselves to travel to 9 different Caribbean islands and give them a flag to raise on the 25th of May when the Windrush ship left the Caribbean. So, that picture, what Liz showed, was very symbolic. And as Liz says, we start our Windrush story from there every week and build up to Windrush Day. So I end my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. That's brilliant. Garrick?
just for the benefit of the point that Rose just made, it is very easy to misunderstand the different aspect around Windrush. Justice for Windrush generation, we focus primarily on dealing with the Home Office scandal that broke in 2018. And we also are trying to change the narrative that is in the public domain. June Elizabeth has just made a very good point. The Home Office scandal has impacted on 65 countries. And we try to emphasize it doesn't matter how you arrive in the UK, because I came on BOAC, others came on a ship. The mode of transport is of no consequence. The most important thing, and we always identify the first generation, 1948 is the first generation, and then subsequent generation that follow right the way through to 1973, and then June Elizabeth rightly states 89 from any other country and naturalization. So we have a timeline around Windrush, but we're particularly interested in helping individuals to understand whether or not they themselves or their family has been impacted by the Home Office scandal, which means two things. We're dealing with immigration law. It was immigration law that was used against the Windrush people. And what we firstly try to do is to say to people, you know, there are two things: rectifying your status, making sure you have the right documentation, and then if you've been impacted because you did not have the right documentation, then we can help you to claim the compensation. Yeah? So there are two separate things. Okay? And over the next few weeks, we will be dealing very specific issues around Windrush. Now, Windrush Day is coming up on the 22nd of June. And so the raising of the flag nationally will take place in the UK. And we also will be hosting a number of different events. Now, it's an opportunity now just to mention what Justice for Windrush Generation will be doing on the 22nd. We will be in Ipswich on the 22nd of June, along with Home Office officials. We call them the engagement team that engage with the public, and also with community and other organizations from Suffolk, Ipswich, that area. And our focus will be trying to assist individuals to understand what is Windrush scandal and what is meant by impact, rectification, compensation. Because there are still issues where people don't understand whether or not it affects them until you start the conversation.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Now, next week, Garrick's going to speak in more detail about the issues that are going on at the moment, and particularly the point that Rose made, that Windrush is used as a term that covers a whole lot more people from a whole lot more countries. So that's our focus for next week. So Garrick, I think you've also got a Windrush manifesto, haven't you, prepared, and you're circulating that?
Yes, so a lot of work has been done to actually bring together a manifesto, which is really targeting government, what we want each of the political parties to actually address. And there will be a debate tonight on the TV, so listen carefully to what's being said by the 7 different parties. But there's also a motion back in the summer of last year, a very important Windrush motion that was accepted, was brought through the TUC, and it was accepted, and that motion has influenced policy. So we will get more information what each political party might be doing in that regard, but they will tell you in their own time what they will be doing.
Right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Garrick, for clarifying that. Now, Horace, you had your hand up earlier, and I need to let you speak next. And then some of the things that Roland's been putting on the chat, I've been putting on the PowerPoint. So we'll just go through all of that for you, Roland. Horace?
Yeah, thanks again. The problem I see is that when we started all of this way back in 2009, we set in motion certain things. And one of the things that we set in motion was to make sure that it wasn't just concentrating on the Windrush period. The Windrush period actually covers the Second World War. And if you decide to ignore all the Second World War and just go straight into 1948, it's just that we needed a name and a period to start it with. The reason why we picked on that one is that the other ships came in and were not stopped. The Windrush ship was stopped. And that's the reason why, as Bill touched upon earlier on, that the government were the ones who were the problems. The government were the ones that didn't see the danger. It was the government that didn't understand what's it like to be on food rationing. It was the government who didn't realize that they needed to rebuild the industries quickly. And, you know, it's great, really, because we are meeting people who didn't go back. When they left the forces, they stayed here. They're not being talked about. They only talk about the ones that went back to the West Indies and they came back on the Windrush. Well, the story is bigger than that. And unless people understand that you must tell the whole story and nothing but that, journey, because we don't use the word story anymore. We call it an historical journey. Then you're going to lose your way. And different groups are going to come in and then chop up the term Windrush and then call it Windrush this, Windrush that, and Windrush the other. My advice, keep it strong. Everybody stick together and everybody call it Windrush. You've got your teams that qualify and what would you call it? Concentrate on certain aspects of that. I think that's fantastic. But really keep it strong. Keep us all together under the term Windrush. And under that emphasis, it's difficult to break us up. It's difficult to fractionalize us. It's difficult to make us weak because they say, oh, I'm talking to that person. I'm talking to that person. Stick together, stay the line, stay on course. The other thing is that, you know, we just call it Windrush. We say Windrush, Windrush, nothing else. We talk about the military. We talk about the civilians that came. We talk about why they came, how they came, and we talk about the Windrush children. The children are the children of the pioneers, of the founders, and that's the reason why we say children. And everybody in this country is a children of the Windrush, and therefore every community should understand that they have a part to play, and that will keep it stronger, and we can only get stronger. When we started this, we knew if we went to the public and the people of this country, they would support us, and that's what they've done, and we've done a great job in getting there. Look at that. Liz is from Australia, controlling part of Windrush in Australia. Isn't that fantastic? And the point is that all the Commonwealth countries should understand this, and all the Commonwealth countries should take part of this. If you want to see what we do, I'm going to put our educational webpage in the link. We work with as many people that want to work with us, and we want to bring an understanding that unity is strength. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'm just going to, the reason I switched my camera off was that I had this extremely thick book, which is written by Rose on British Caribbean veterans. Don't know if you can see this here. Okay. Serving Queen and country. Rose, I hope you don't mind, but I use this normally for keeping my laptop a little bit higher. So I keep it close to me all the time, Rose. Rose, you've got your hand up. Carry on.
Actually, I use 3 of them usually at home as well,
Yes.
for my laptop. I found, Horace, your comment has really gladdened my heart, because I was struggling. The use of the term Windrush, if it is done in the sort of, with a sense of unity that you had described, then that feels solid, it feels perfect. And I, with Garrick's comment, June Elizabeth's comments, and others, I can now go forward properly, because it has been so open to interpretation, has been misused. And I think we have to, have a sort of paradigm shift, if you like, and actually use it in the way that you are describing. And thereby, all of us, it's like the mantra that, if we're using it in this same way, because there are people that I've written about, heard about, and whose journeys did begin before 1948, and those whose journeys continue beyond 1973, 1989, and there are still issues within those, within that we need to embrace, to understand. So yes, I can now accept that if it is this form of interpretation, a unified, one voice, one interpretation, one battle, or series of battles, if you like, because the war is yet to be won, then that's fine. I feel able to move forward in a very positive and strong way. So thank you, all of you, for making that feel better for me. And my confusion is not, it's gone, but it's actually a reviewed and revised version, if you like, to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, Garrick, just while you're going to join us, I've lost the PowerPoint again. How I don't manage this, do this. Right, I just wanted to share, because I've just put here, we've got it. So Garrick, you speak over these
Yes.
slides, please, will you?
Yes. So just 2 points for Rose. So although Windrush is used as an umbrella, the challenge for us, and this is the work that Justice for Windrush has been doing, is that Africans don't understand Windrush. And so when we have the conversation about Windrush being global, we have to really explain to them, the period from 48 up to 73 up to 89, because they will only comprehend what they see in the public domain as Black people coming off a ship back in 1948. And that's the image. So we're having to keep challenging their understanding. So although we're using the umbrella to represent the 65 country, we have to really explain to individual, particularly Africans, and also Asian, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc., that include those countries. The other point I think that we need to stress, Windrush is only part of the modern contemporary history. You know, historians, and Rose will from her book, yesterday was the D-Day celebration in Normandy. And of course, I don't know, did anybody see any black faces on the television around that? Was there any faces that you could recognize as Commonwealth people? I didn't see any, but maybe I may have missed them.
I was looking.
I didn't see any.
I was still looking.
You know, and of course, you know, again, Rose, you know, with your book, the contribution that the Commonwealth people have made, and yet we don't see any evidence yesterday of their contribution. So again, it's important that when we have these conversations, whether we're referring to the First World War or the Second, that, you know, we Black people contributed to liberty and to freedom and to build a better society as we have today. And, you know, people need to know that.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary. Just stay on, will you? And I don't know if Roland's able to talk or not. But this is the
I'm going to bring Roland in, because in the last couple of weeks, Roland been really been doing all the work behind the scene.
Right. Okay.
And been attending a number of different events, including the last parliamentary event in May. Roland, are you there?
Can you speak, Roland, at the moment? Just while Roland's getting his act together, just to say that the Windrush compensation scheme, this is taken off Roland's picture, and I've just put that scheme is.
And so we run a platform, a Zoom platform, twice a month, second and last Sunday of each month, where we help individuals to understand the Windrush compensation scheme and to also understand what it means by rectifying your status. We do that twice a month on the Zoom platform, and we promote that on the Eventbrite platform. 2 till 4 GMT on a Sunday afternoon. We get international people joining the platform from different parts of the world to understand what this compensation scheme is all about, and to see whether or not they're eligible to apply to the scheme, either to rectifying their status or if they've been impacted for compensation. We also work closely with an advocacy project based in Liverpool called Liverpool Advocates for Windrush. And that project will help individuals to submit an application for either rectifying your status or for a compensation claim. And we've been very successful in assisting individuals with their claim. And that platform operates on the first and third Sunday of each month. First and third Sunday of each month. There is a dedicated website for the advocacy. It's Liverpool Advocates for Windrush.org.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So this is about the next session of the Justice for Windrush Generations events, discussing all the different issues. So that's that one that Roland put up, and also to say that on Windrush Day, you're going to Garrick, I know you're going to be in Ipswich.
And Roland will be in Ipswich presenting on this special event.
Okay, and that's the Windrush Compensation Scheme International.
But also it will be available
forum.
on Zoom platform for people
Oh,
to
right.
join,
Oh, right.
join the conversation.
Good, good. Well, I'll be in the UK, so I'll join at that time. That sounds brilliant to me. Right, now just to say, folks, that this is what I was talking to you about, what we've done with Black History Conversations. We've been building this program up. Yes, it was great that you were able to join us as well as Levi today. And next week, Garrick's going to take more time to talk about the 65 countries, Commonwealth and overseas territory, and the more wider general, what could we do? What can we do to raise awareness and to tell folks about some of the numerous activities that that have taken place over the past year and far more. And I was honoured to be able to come to the House of Commons last year to one of your sessions, and it's just remarkable the work that you're doing, but still more work to do. So you'll also next week, please, Garrick, present that information that you've prepared for the political parties. Got so many bits of paper written down here. The manifestos, please. Then the week after, June Elizabeth might like to come in here in a moment just to say that nurses from the Caribbean, two of the nurses from the Jamaica Nurses Association are going to join us, and we're going to talk about that because last week we had the most amazing opportunities to hear about what some, again, it wasn't specifically Jamaican. We had different Caribbean teachers, people with teachers with Caribbean heritage, and it was just absolutely fascinating. I apologise, I haven't posted the link on the Black History Conversations website, but I will do. So next week's going to be nurses. I'll come back to you in a moment to say more about that, June Elizabeth, if you would. But then the week after, the 28th, Juanita Cox is going to talk about the findings of her Windrush research, which is going to be fascinating. Now, at that stage, we are actually taking Black History Conversations on the road, and that Black History Conversations, I don't know how this is going to work, is going to be presented from, of all places, Rhyl Fire Station in North Wales. Now, the reason that we are presenting from Rhyl Fire Station in North Wales, you'll be with me as well, Garrick, at this event, is that they asked us to, and we were quite surprised to get a request from a fire station saying they wanted to do something for Windrush Day. They didn't actually want to do it on Windrush Day, so we've settled for Friday the 28th of June. And then I realised that it was on at the same time as Black History Conversations because here in Australia it's like 2 in the morning. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to have Juanita presenting the findings of the Windrush research. So that should be absolutely fascinating. And before that, at 2:30, we're going to have, we hope, the Custos of Clarendon and the Mayor of Clarendon, because we're hoping that we can manage to, the North Wales Jamaica Society is, which Garrick is the chair. We're hoping to be able to get the support of the fire service to provide Clarendon with a reconditioned fire engine. So this might all sound a bit complicated, but anyway, that's what's happening on that session. And then June Elizabeth, you can talk about what Daniel's going to present about as well, because you've organised that. And you've also organised on the 12th for another colleague to join us. I haven't quite updated this. It should be version 2, version 3. So June Elizabeth, can you just tell us about the Jamaican nurses? Anything else about Juanita, Daniel, and your other colleague who's joining us?
Okay, yes. Very quickly, because I'm mindful of the time, Liz. What time is it in Australia?
2 o'clock in the morning.
Right, okay then. So I'll just be very brief. I just want to get it clear. The Nurses Association of Jamaica, UK. There's a Nurses Association of Jamaica in Jamaica, but they're political. So the Nurses Association of Jamaica, UK, there's a branch in London and a branch in Birmingham. So the executive secretary and executive treasurer will be coming to give a brief presentation next week. Hopefully some of the other nurses will join
the
who are
week
not
after
working.
next.
Yeah, the week after next. The week after Gareth. And then the week after them, we've got Dr. Juanita Cox, and I've supported her with her research. And she has done a circuit of the universities. She presented at the University of Northampton, and then she presented at the Nottingham University, and she presented at the Legal Lay Day. And we've got some pictures of that. And I won't say much about it, but her research findings are excellent. And then we've got Dr. Marcella Day, who will be talking about her research and her findings of why a lot of Black people don't holiday in England. And it's excellent. She did come and give us a little preview, I think it was last year, but since then she's finished it and it's excellent. And then Daniel Johnson, he is an associate lecturer and he's also a musician. He's very talented. He's got his own studio. But what he's done, which is really great, the children that have been expelled from school, he's designed a program, and he's got his own studio that was launched just before Easter. I got the mayor to come and cut the ribbon, and the young people, when they come, he gives them their confidence and he helps them become back into society through music. So I'll just leave that there for Daniel Johnson. And he's in his 30s, and actually he's been my mentee, protege, from he was 12 years old. And he's excellent. Liz will introduce him when she puts up his profile. So that's a quick list.
Thank you very much indeed for that.
Question, Liz, because I changed my diary because I wasn't sure. When I spoke to you earlier, you said that you might have to cancel something. You know, you're coming to England on the 19th.
Yes.
The Wednesday. Are you going to be fit and running on the Friday for the nurses?
Yes, I should be, because it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so that'll be fine.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, then that's all I wanted to ask. I don't know when you're coming in. Where will you be on Friday? Are you going to do it from Northampton? Are you be on your way up north? Or, you know, we'll talk about that later.
We will. But I'm flying into Birmingham, so I'll be in the Midlands for a few days and then go up to Wales the next week. Yes, just
question for Elizabeth.
Yeah, okay.
It's just a quick one. I just wondered, why don't Black people holiday in England? I just wondered if there's a quick answer.
You'll have to come to the presentation.
Okay.
I can't take that away from Dr. Marcella. That's what she researched, and she's got all the facts, and you know, it's quite interesting, really. I was quite amazed. You know, she's got the facts. As a researcher, she's also a lecturer in tourism at the University of Northampton and in law. So I'm not in a position to answer that question.
All right. That's just that I've got a fascinating question in Australia. I camp in Australia all the time, and Black people in Australia, I'm talking about non-Aboriginal Black people, because there's a
Yeah.
substantial
Yeah,
community
yeah,
now.
yeah.
They never camp. All of the cultures go camping except for blacks. So I just have a similar question. I'm just fascinated.
Well,
with
I
these
never
questions.
used to like camping when I was a St. John's
There you
ambulance
go.
brigade. I hated it. And when I went
All
to
right.
Yellowstone Park, I was so glad. My uncle said we're going to camp the night, and there was a bear let loose, you know,
Yeah.
and everybody had to get in their cars and drive out. I was
Never
so
again.
glad.
All right.
Right. Well, thank you very much, June Elizabeth, for that. And thank you for coming in there, Levi.
Thank you.
And Marcella has spoken with us before on Black History Conversations while she was doing the research. And it is absolutely fascinating, and it is quite true. And it's something that that needs to be really understood. I was really fascinated. So that'll be a great presentation as well.
Sorry, so excuse me, Liz. That gentleman, you could direct him to your website, and he can read up the first part of her
You can watch the
presentation.
first one. We'll find that. This
Warm up.
is Levi Lawrence, who does himself camp around and about on a holiday in Australia. I know, I'm always fascinated by what you're doing, but it's really strange. And
I'll be caravanning around the UK now.
Well, yes, it'll be it. You'll be, you know, a black face on the campsites. That'll interest folks. So you'll be able to test out Marcella's theory or Marcella's research. It will be really interesting. Okay, so Levi, it's really good to know that you're still there. Is Ozolette still there?
No, she's disappeared.
All right. Well, Levi, you've stuck with us for this very long Black History Conversations today, but it's been absolutely fascinating. Bill's had to go on now because he was doing this additional interview this afternoon with a grandson, I think, of someone who was on the Windrush. His work has been fantastic, and he's just stuck at it, as have you. You Horace, with the work that you're doing, so consistent, keeping it going, keeping it moving. And Horace, while you're here, I'm just going to speak about Chris Campbell, which was such a sadness because in his passing we lost a lot, and he'd done some really fantastic work down in South Wales.
Yeah, he was awesome. You know, we linked up, we became stronger, and it goes that way sometimes when you're just starting to run, something gets in the way and he slows right down. But what an amazing guy! What an amazing team in Wales. Some great barriers have been broken down there, and you Liz, are part of that. And you know, may they continue. We've just been asked to come back to Wales on the 10th of August, bringing as many standards as we can with the historical history of the West Indians, so that people can learn more. The problem is with somebody, I think it was earlier who asked the question earlier on, is that people think that the West Indians, that was it for the West Indians. You know, we only did it in the Windrush period time, but yes, you know, and I know, it's for 500 years of history. And that's where the term comes from. Britain called and we answered. It's for the 500 years of history. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, speak to Emma quite often. I speak to the rest of the guys quite often.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, love him to bits. God bless.
I'm going to ask you for Emma's contact details because I haven't got them, and I would really like to see her this time. And maybe I can come down to the event on the 10th of August. That would be really quite special. So thank you. And also, Horace, we've got in North Wales, we've been recognising the achievements of Jimmy Mullins. Now, Jimmy was in the RAF and ended up serving at Valley. Now, sadly, his wife's passed recently, but his daughter Karen is a member of the North Wales Jamaica Society. And last year, we celebrated his life and times, and we had somebody come from RAF Valley. And what they're hoping to do is they're hoping to do something in their museum there to display Jimmy's uniform and Jimmy's medals. So I'll keep you in touch on that, because you may be able to come along and help us with that. And then finally, while we're remembering people, we had another, oh dear, I keep losing the PowerPoints on my, just a minute. I just wanted to remember, because I'd been contacted to say that, oops a daisy, let me just get rid of that and then I can get back in again. Thank you very much indeed. I'm just writing Emma's number down quickly while I'll catch it up in a minute. Share the screen, and you can tell how late at night it is now, can't you? I'm talking to myself. Right, okay then. So why have I lost that? Here it is. That Sean Crichton has passed. And Sean was an activist who worked with many others, who it was the British and Black and Asian history, and he was secretary of the of BASA and the researcher of Northeast history. So really very sad, and Sean did join us on a few occasions for Black History Conversations, and we were always very grateful to have his involvement, and so that's a sadness as well. So I just wanted to pass that one on, and just for those of you who perhaps haven't, I think perhaps Earl hasn't been around all the times we've done Black History Conversations. This started as something in COVID that seemed like an idea after George Floyd's murder, and we realised that really there was still a need for more and better understanding about our shared history, about Black history, and that's how we started these sessions. And we're in season 12 at the moment, and we're still struggling to get our website sorted out, but we had some funding from Jim Thakordin, who's also sadly passed, Dr. Jim Thakordin. So in his honour, we are going to get this website up and ready by the end of August. I think that's our current deadline. Okay, so is there anything else, anybody? I'm just checking the chat again.
Sorry, Lynn. I don't know where that number came from.
Chip in, Horace.
I'll put the correct number on there. All right.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really, really kind. Thank you. That's lovely. Oh, that's wonderful that you're going to. David, just speak a little bit more about Sean then, please. I was burbling a bit there.
Okay, I'll pass it over to David. It was, well, it was Roxanne.
I don't mind.
You, me, David? Just a little bit about Sean, how we knew him, maybe.
No, well, I mean, I don't think I'd claim to have known Sean all that well, but we met him at various events. He was running bookstalls usually, always very knowledgeable to talk to. We were very privileged to be invited to his birthday gathering at his house only last year. So it came as a bit of a surprise when we heard that he was kind of clearly unwell. He sent around an email probably 2 or 3 months ago saying that he was dropping out of all activities because he had got some unspecified problem that was not going to be curable. So I don't know what the problem was, but it is a sad loss. He was very active in the Croydon area where we live, and also, of course, he was very well known for doing lots of very good work in the northeast of England. And I think he probably went to Durham University, and that was hence the links with the northeast. But it's certainly a sad loss, and I think, as Roxanne has said, we're planning to go to his funeral next week.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. That's great. And thank you to you all. It's been another fascinating session, and something that we really do need to explore more and more about. And Garrick and I often talk about how do we get the word out there to many more people. But I think until we get these opportunities where we talk together in conversation, it's hard to know how we can do other things. But so many of you are already doing other things out there, and I'm just delighted that you're willing to join me from time to time, and Garrick and June Elizabeth and Simon with his support, that we're able to put on these sessions and keep it rolling along. So it's going to need a bit of motivation over the next few weeks. So June Elizabeth and Garrick, I'm looking forward to your every bit of support, because life changes very much for me when I fly to the other side of the planet and join some of you there.
Excuse
All right, I
me,
look
Liz.
forward to seeing you
Excuse
all.
me,
Yes,
Liz.
June Elizabeth.
Before you
Yes.
go, I don't want to put their Horace on the spot, but the last time that Horace came on the platform, you did say to ask him if he would be able to come back, and he said he would do, because he's so
Yes.
interesting. Yeah, so
This is
I don't want to put
true.
him on the spot, but maybe you could make contact with him afterwards and send him an email to see if he's available on any of the spots for our Windrush Black History. Yes,
Would be
Liz does,
excellent.
that's not a problem. Is whether I've got the what would you call it? I haven't got
fine.
an event or an appointment or
That's
whatever
what we
going
said.
on.
Yes,
Yeah,
but you know, anytime you're free, we'll push you in. Yeah,
I will.
I
I
would
will.
say
okay,
so.
lovely. There we go. Thank you.
It would be really good, because Garrick's going to talk next week about with the wider issues of Windrush. But it would be great to also, if you were around next week, it would also be great to have some input about why West Indians are here and what you're doing. Otherwise, we can look to the 19th of July, which I think may be our last session that we finished before the summer break. But yes, and Horace, I'm sorry. Sometimes things slip by me. I'm at that age now. Okay, well, thanks to all of you. I'm just absolutely delighted, and lovely to hear from you again, Earl. You keep joining in, and thanks, Roland, for listening in. Okay, so I'll see you all soon then, and talk to you soon then, Garrick.
Yeah.
All the
Okay.
very best then.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
Liz.
you.
One love, one love.
Bye.
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 Have a good weekend.